Hey everybody, real quick, before we get into the Season 3 recap, if you need a Season 2 recap, just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you to it. Now, in Season 3, the Pogues are having a grand old time on an island. They're actually surviving pretty well. That doesn't mean, though, that they don't want to get off. And when a plane flies by, they jump at the opportunity to get its attention, lighting a fire and hoping to God that the plane sees it. Luckily for them, it does. The plane lands, and right away, Sarah is pretty suspicious of this thing. Ever since what happened with her dad, she thinks that everybody is out to find her with the backing of Ward. So she's pretty suspicious. But it is their only option off this remote island, so they have to take it. When they're in the air, though, they are still suspicious of this guy. JJ catches the pilot, Jimmy, in a lie about what he was doing in the area. So they start snooping around the plane, trying to find any hint of the fact that it was Ward who sent him. John B is doing his best to distract the pilot the whole time so that he's not onto him. And when they see a postcard of the boat that Ward was on, the one that was carrying the cross, that big tanker, they know that it was in fact Ward who sent this guy. The problem is they're high up in a plane. They can't exactly land right there. They have to wait until they do land to safely get away from him. They figure that at 6-on-1, it shouldn't be too hard. But when Jimmy the pilot looks behind them and sees that they're stealing from him, he starts fighting them off. It causes the plane to do a nosedive, and while he's able to steady the plane, he doesn't steady it enough to avoid a crash landing in Barbados. Everybody is fine, although Jimmy is a little bit knocked out. When the Pogues look on shore, they see that the police are arriving pretty quickly. They know that they need to get out of this boat immediately and get to as far away from the police as possible. But Key isn't about to let Jimmy drown. So she frees him, dragging his body out of the plane and dragging it to shore. The issue is her friends had gone the complete opposite direction. They didn't go on shore, they were hiding under a pier. So they're watching Key go to shore and save this guy, but also they're watching her get arrested. Key's not too happy about getting caught by the police. She looks at Jimmy and says, "I can't believe this, I saved your life. Who are you? Was it Ward who sent you?" And Jimmy says, "What? No, look, just do what they ask and you probably won't get hurt." Key is then taken away by the police and the Pogues just have to sit there and watch it. They know that they can't jump into action right away. They're going to get caught, and they can't free Key if they're caught by the police as well. The Pogues get to safety and they start formulating a plan on how to save Key. They have no idea where she is, where she was taken. Their only clue is what JJ found in Jimmy's wallet. JJ wasn't about to go through somebody's belongings and not pinch their stuff. So he was able to grab the guy's wallet, and he does have an address for the guy. He figures that that's probably where Key was taken. They head over to Jimmy's house, and Jimmy's not there, and more importantly, neither is Key. But what they do find is very interesting. It's a painting of the San Jose sinking. The San Jose was from Denmark's diary. It was the ship that the cross was stolen from. They know that this isn't a coincidence. The fact that this guy just has a painting of the ship that Denmark Taney was writing about means that Jimmy's definitely a treasure guy. But they don't have too much time to discuss it because Jimmy comes home. They're able to ambush him and hold him at knife point and have him answer some questions. And the main question that Sarah has is, was it Ward who sent? But just like with Key, Jimmy looks at her and says, "What are you talking about?" Because the fact is, no, it wasn't Ward who sent him. He's never heard of Ward. He has no idea who Ward is. A guy named Carlos Singh sent Jimmy, and he basically runs Barbados. Jimmy also goes on to tell them that Carlos has eyes all over the island out there looking for them. They start looking through Jimmy's bag, and they find the payoff for Kiara. It's quite a bit of money. And they also find a location for Carlos Singh, but Jimmy warns them, you really don't want to go there. But Jimmy's warning gives off a tip that that's probably where Key is. And it is, in fact, where Key was taken. She gets there, and she's very confused on who has her, what they want with her, what they're doing. She's brought up to this huge house that is heavily guarded, and when she gets inside, she looks around and sees that it has a bunch of artifacts in it. Ones that you'd probably find in the Indiana Jones gift shop in Disney World, although these things are the real thing. The security doesn't tell Key anything. They just lock her in a room and tell her to get ready for dinner, which is going to be at 8 p.m. And in the room, there's 3 dresses, and it says, pick your size. So at the very least, Key's going to get a free dress out of this thing. But it's not just going to be Key and Carlos at this dinner alone. They're going to be joined by Rafe. Ward is still on the mend in Guadalupe, completely knocked out, and definitely not able to do business. Rafe has taken it upon himself to take over the family business in Ward's absence. That includes selling off the cross. That's something that Rafe wants to do as quickly as possible. He meets with an appraisal guy, and the guy confirms that it is in fact the real thing, and he has a buyer in Barbados. Rafe doesn't ask too many questions, he just agrees to meet with him. So Rafe takes his boat down to Barbados to meet with Carlos Singh. This is quite a surprise for Key, because when Key enters the room, she's not expecting to see Rafe, and Rafe certainly isn't expecting to see Key. After the initial shock of, well, what the hell are you doing here, Carlos makes his appearance and lets them know why he's brought both of them to this dinner. He tells them a story that 450 years ago, a Spanish soldier came out of the Orinoco Basin with a few gold beads. When they asked the Spanish soldier where the beads came from, the Spanish soldier replied that he got them from a peaceful indigenous tribe. And this indigenous tribe lived in a city of gold, El Dorado. For the next 450 years, people tried to find the gold, but they came up short. Now he's taken it upon himself to find that city of gold. And the reason he's brought Key and Rafe together is because he figures they will play a huge part in him completing this quest. That's because he believes that Key and her friends are in possession of something that can help him finish this quest. It's a diary. More specifically, it's the diary of Denmark Taney. He incorrectly thinks that Key and Rafe are friends because they're from the same area. He has no idea how much bad blood is actually between the two. They both tell him that they have no idea what he's talking about, but he doesn't believe them. One of the reasons why is because Rafe has the cross. He's trying to sell it. And Carlos doesn't think that anybody that would be able to find the cross wouldn't have access to the diary. He thinks one is a necessity of the other. Neither Key or Rafe give Carlos any information on how they obtained the cross. But Carlos just does not believe that they don't know anything about this diary. He tells both of them, once I have the diary, you're free to leave. In the meantime, you can enjoy the grounds during your stay, but I'm going to warn you, I'm not a man of infinite patience. You have one day. And if you want to see what I'm made of, go to the window to see a demonstration. Carlos then locks them in the room, and Key heads to the window to see what Carlos was talking about. She sees Jimmy dragged up because somebody on the island saw Jimmy talking to the Pogues, and they ratted him out. She then sees Carlos with a gun follow Jimmy, and while she doesn't see Jimmy get shot, she hears a gunshot. She can figure out the rest. It's at this point that Rafe and Key get very concerned. Rafe looks at Key and says, I need you to be honest with me right now. Do you have this diary? And Key says, no. In episode 2, the Pogues found a safe place to hunker down for the night. They tried to get to Key, but when they went to Carlos Singh's compound, it was just too fortified. They couldn't actually do anything. They would have gotten caught. They find an abandoned building, and they try to start formulating yet another plan, but they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to get in touch with Carlos. They don't know what he wants. Yeah, they figure that he wants money, but they also figure that this probably has something to do with the cross or the gold or both. While the Pogues are trying to find Key, Big John is trying to find John B. He and Limbri are on the island, but they have no idea where John is. And they know that they need to get to him before Carlos does. It's a Hail Mary, but John does have an idea. Church bells. He used to signal John B when he was a child using a bell. So he and Limbri head up to the church. They pay off the priest, and it allows Big John to use the church bells to his heart's content. It actually does work. John B does hear the church bell, and it does tip off the memory of when he was a kid, but it's been so long since he's actually seen his dad that he just feels like he's hearing things. He needs to get back on track. How are they going to get Key back? It's not all bad, though, because JJ completely forgot that he stole Jimmy's phone. They start looking through the phone, and they find the number to Carlos Singh. As the Pogues are arguing about what to text Singh, because they don't want to make this any worse for Kiara, Key has actually decided to talk to Singh and try to get out of this mess herself. She tells him that she doesn't have the diary on her, but she can get a copy. In order to do that, though, she has to go by herself. And Singh doesn't want to let her do that because that doesn't guarantee him that she'll ever come back. She tries to use Rafe as collateral, saying, you can keep him, but he just kind of chuckles at that. She reiterates that if he just lets her go, she can get in the diary, but he says, no, I didn't create this fortune by being a fool. Don't waste my time. This diary holds the key to the ultimate conquest. In the middle of this, he gets the text from Jimmy's phone. He finds it very interesting that he's getting texts from Jimmy beyond the grave. Unfortunately for the Pogues, they have no idea that Jimmy's now dead. So while they spend a while trying to word this thing to not tip Sing off, the mere fact that he's even getting a text tips Sing off. The text they sent, though, says, "I got these two," and it's a picture of Sarah and John B. Sing responds with, "Oh, great, where's your location?" And as they're trying to figure out where the best location is to escape from, they get another text that says, "Never mind, I just tracked your location," because JJ never turned off location services. The Pogues know it's only a matter of time before Sing's men are on them. They have to start formulating some kind of plan, so they decide to hide out and catch these people in a trap. Back at Sing's compound, Key is very concerned for her friends. She's also in a pickle because Rafe is the only person that she can really count on in this situation, and he's not trustworthy at all. He knows that. He knows that he's not trustworthy, and he doesn't even blame her for it. But he tells her, "I'm all you've got. I also have a boat that can get us off this island, but first, we got to get out of here." They then hear all of Sing's men leaving to go get the rest of the Pogues. And while it does suck for the Pogues, it's probably Key and Rafe's best shot of escaping. The two fake a fight, which forces the lone security guard who locked them in to have to open the door. Rafe then knocks them out. They tie the guy up. They steal his gun and his cell phone. Right before they do actually leave the house, Key emails herself a picture of a painting that Carlos Sing was telling the story of El Dorado in front of. He seemed to be focused on this one painting, so she finds it interesting, and maybe she can use it later on. They then notice that there is a truck that is leaving the property, so they run it down, hop in the back of it, and they're surprised because there's somebody else in the back of this hay truck. Rafe, however, jumps into action, knocking this guy out and literally throwing him over the moving vehicle. Key definitely didn't think that Rafe needed to go that far, but Rafe has anger issues. Once they're kind of in the clear, Rafe tells Key, "I don't mind driving you and taking you to somewhere safe, but I'm not taking your friends. That ain't happening." Key tells him what he wants to hear, that all she wants to do is get off the island, but she's not about to let the Pogues down. Once they actually get on Rafe's boat, Key gets Rafe in a compromising position, which allows her to kick him off the boat. And while he's in the water, she takes off. He is livid, but she just tells him, "I'm sorry, I gotta help my friends." And her friends could absolutely use the help. The trap that they set for Carlos Sing's men worked. It was a little bit of a battle, but they were able to evade Carlos Sing's guys and get the hell out of there. While it buys them some time, they do know that Carlos is still going to be onto them, though. And they once again have no idea how they're going to save Kiara. At this point, they still think that Kiara is stuck at Carlos Sing's place. But Key uses a security officer's phone that she stole to text Jimmy's phone. She texts them a location, a time, and she ends it with P4L. That's the tip that it is coming from Key and not from Carlos. There's no way that Carlos Sing would know that P4L stands for Pogues for Life. They head to the location of the marina. They start looking for Key, and it doesn't take long for them to find her. Everybody gives Key a giant hug, and all they want to do is get the hell off that island. But one thing has really been bothering John B. is the fact that those church bells have gotten louder, and they're continuing in the same fashion that his dad used when he was a kid. He can't shake the feeling. He feels like he's got a little bit of time to go investigate it, so he tells Sarah, "I have to. I don't know what it is, but I got a feeling. So just sit tight. I'll be back in a little bit." Sarah thinks this is absolutely nuts, but she also knows that John B. will obsess over it if he doesn't get the answer. So she lets him go, but tells him, "Hurry." And that's a pretty smart move because guys have tipped off Carlos Sing that the Pogues are at the marina, and they're on their way. As they're waiting for John B. to take off, Key fills in Pope and JJ that Sing wanted Denmark's diary of all things. The thing that gets JJ really excited is the fact that it might lead to a bigger treasure. But the excitement quickly wanes as time passes by and John B. still isn't at the boat. And a little while later, Carlos's men arrive. They don't want to leave John B., but they're kind of forced to. There's a lot of infighting about whether to stay, whether to leave, but ultimately they have to take off without John B., vowing to come back and get him. In episode 3, everybody is leaving Barbados. That includes Rafe. He has to mug a guy for his wallet, but he's able to hop on a boat and get back to Guadeloupe to meet up with his family. At this point, Ward has woken up. When Rafe meets up with Ward, he starts apologizing for screwing everything up, but Ward is very understanding. He tells him that he stepped up in his absence. He did what he had to do. But what he really needs him to do right now is go back to the Outer Banks. There's nothing there for them there anymore. So he wants Rafe to wrap everything up, sell the properties, sell the companies. Leave it so there's nothing attaching the Cameron name to the Outer Banks. Rafe does question why he's going back to the Outer Banks, but his dad convinces him that that's what he needs him to do at this current time. He's not the only one going to the Outer Banks, though. So are the Pogues. They have a debate whether to go back for John B. or not, and that's when they get a phone call from John B. It's pretty muffled because the service is bad, but John B. went to the church, and he found his dad, although that part doesn't get through. The only thing they really hear is John B. say, "Meet us in the Outer Banks." After the initial shock of John B. seeing his dad for the first time, it quickly goes away because they have to get the hell out of that church. Sing's guys are onto them. They know that they're not going to be safe in Barbados, so they're going to need to flee, but not before they stop by and grab something first. John B. and Big John headed to the little alcove that Big John was staying at. While Big John is grabbing some items, the whole time he's telling his son, "I'm on to something, it's big, I'm close." So John B. knows that nothing's changed with his dad. He's still as hungry as ever to find a treasure. John B. does get a little concerned when he sees his dad grab a gun and some bullets and start talking about a retrieval mission. But his dad starts speaking in fortune cookie wisdom, and John B. hasn't seen his dad in so long that he just follows him. Big John does tell his son that the reason why they're rushing so much isn't just Sing, it's Limbri as well. In order to get back to John B., Big John had to get mixed up in a whole lot of things, including Limbri. He knows that now that he's found his son, he's going to owe Carla something, and he'd rather pay later than now. After stopping at the alcove, there's one more place they need to go. It's a local guy that sells a bunch of artifacts. Big John enters the back door and peeks his head around the corner, and when the merchant sees him, he shuts down the shop because he hasn't seen Big John in a long time. These two used to be partners, but not really anymore. He knows exactly what Big John wants, and Big John doesn't have time to negotiate, so he pulls a gun on him, which really catches the merchant off guard. But he doesn't get flustered. He just hands over what Big John came for, and it's this sculpture. It's probably 1.5 feet. Looks like it weighs about 10 pounds, maybe. Big John tells his son that it's the Signpost of Orinoco. They think that it leads towards the treasure of El Dorado. The only problem is it's one of two pieces. They need to find the other piece. On top of it, if you find the other half, you also need to decipher it. As Big John and the merchant are discussing the fact that the merchant still wants his cut of the fortune if it's found, he hears the door open. John B. and Big John get pretty concerned because they don't want visitors at this time, that's for sure. So they start hiding out in the back, and it's their worst nightmare. It's Carlos Sing. When they hear Sing's voice, they start to try to sneak out the back, out a window. And the merchant's doing a really good job of holding up Carlos and his men from doing a search of the property. But John B. and his dad aren't careful enough. They make a little bit of noise, and it tips off Carlos and his men that there are, in fact, people there. They have to race to the marina to get on their boat before they're caught. And it's a close call, but they're able to jump on board and get the hell out of Barbados. Carlos isn't too discouraged about missing out on them because in the long run, he knows where they live. And he also has a pretty good idea of where they would be headed. And they, like everybody else, is headed to the Outer Banks. On the trip there, John B. fills in his dad on the fact that he got married. It is to Sarah Cameron, which he's worried about his dad's reaction to that, but actually his dad's fine with it. He's thrilled for his son. He does think he's too young, but he's happy. Big John then fills his son in on what happened with him. The fact that he was washed up on that island, and it was Carlos's men that found him. He tried to fight them off as best he could. He ended up killing a guy in the process. That was the body that they found. But Carlos dragged him back to Barbados, figuring that he could help find this treasure of El Dorado. Carlos was the one that actually had the Signpost of Orinoco. He wanted Big John to decipher it, but the first chance that Big John had, he attacked Carlos, took the signpost, and tried to escape. They then start discussing the whole treasure. Sing believes that the diary holds a clue to the missing piece, and Big John agrees. If they can get the diary, then they're golden. The Pogues also had a long trip back to the Outer Banks and a lot of time to talk. There's a connection going on between Key and JJ. It's like the elephant in the room. At one point, they get really close to each other on the boat. It seems like they're about to kiss, but they're caught by Pope. JJ doesn't want to hurt his friend's feelings, and Pope has a hard time not expressing the fact that he's hurt by this. JJ tries to talk to Pope about it, and Pope explains, look, I'm not happy about this. I'm not going to pretend that this is my favorite thing, but I'm also not going to stop you. If you want to be with Key, go ahead. It seems like, though, JJ is abiding by the rules of misters before sisters. The idea, however, of his friend being with the girl that he has a crush on is really bothering Pope. And the person he confides in about this is Cleo. And Cleo understands. She tells Pope that she's been through a similar situation. She had a crush on a guy, but he was just using her. But the real message she tells Pope is, I'm over it, and I think you need to be too. Why are you focused on thinking about someone who's not thinking about you? They strengthen their connection by creating a little club called the No Love Club. They even have a special handshake for it. About a day later, everybody arrives back in the Outer Banks, although separate locations. Big John is especially happy to be back. He never thought he'd be so happy to see that run-down place he called a home. As they lay down for the night, Big John does ask the most important question. Do you know where that diary is? And John B says, yeah, we have a copy. It's in the Twinkie, which is probably in the impound lot. John B then apologizes for the last time the two had talked, before this encounter. It was a pretty ugly fight. He said some things he regretted, and then he didn't see his dad for a long time, so he just wants to apologize. And Big John completely understands. They then turn in for the night, and John B has a really bad nightmare. But when he's woken up, Sarah is there. She's thrilled to see him. They hug each other, and he excitedly tells her, my dad, I found him. But the thing is, Big John is gone. In episode 4, you find out that it's just a false alarm. Big John didn't leave. I mean, he did. He went to go find the Twinkie to try to find the diary, but what he found was just a bunch of mush. The window was open, rain got in. That copy of the diary is long gone. When he returns home, he's thrilled, though, because there's his daughter-in-law waiting for him. The trio of Big John, John B, and Sarah give each other a giant hug. After getting caught up for a little bit, Sarah heads out. She wants to get back to her place, find some clothes, maybe a phone. But they agree to meet back up at John B's place at 6. Once Sarah leaves, Big John pulls up in the Twinkie. John B's more concerned with the fact that why he didn't make this known when Sarah was around. But Big John isn't about to let any secrets out. He wants to keep everything close to the vest, and that means just him and his son. He fills his son in on what happened to the copy of the diary that they had, but luckily he does have a plan B, and he tells John B, hop in the car. As they head on over to Big John's backup plan, John B tells his dad, look, we're not keeping anything from Sarah. She's one of us. And Big John reminds his son that they lost the gold to her dad, they lost the cross to her brother. He doesn't think it's a coincidence, but John B does think it's a coincidence. After all, he did live it. What it boils down to is Big John is just reluctant to trust anybody. John B kind of understands, and then he asks, all right, where are we going? And they're going to Mr. Sun's house, John B's old history teacher. He's the one who has the original diary anyway, so he figures that's the best place to look. Although word on the street is Sun has vanished. They doubt that it's there, but they want to check around. They go inside, and sure enough, no one is there, or at least that's what they think. As John B is looking at a copy of Cape Fear, he's attacked, and so is Big John. It's the same smugglers that John B and the Pokes were dealing with before. They've been hired by Singh to go to Sun's place and find the diary, and they found it. They tied up Sun in the bathroom. John B frees Sun, but then he's called by his dad because the smugglers are getting away. They chase after the smugglers, but it's only a matter of time before the smugglers get to the bay, and then they're gone forever. So John B improvises and hops on a jet ski and chases after him. The jet ski is faster than their boat. The smugglers know that, so they're forced to turn around. Big John would like this to go down without confrontation. He finds out who they are from his son, so he offers them more money than Singh's offering. Basically telling them that Singh is giving them a raw deal because what they have in their possession could lead to more money than they know what to do with. But in order to get that money, they need what Big John has. So he wants to strike a deal with them. The smugglers agree, but in reality what they're planning on doing is shooting John B and taking Big John back to Singh. They know they'll get more money that way. Both Johns ride up to the boat, but as they're about to get on, Big John notices that the one guy is about to shoot his son. So Big John shoots first. He kills the one and then kills the other one execution style. And this really has John B shaken up. He watches his dad dispose of the bodies, scuttle the ship, and act like he's just mowing the lawn as he does it, like it's business as usual. Now at least the Johns have the diary. And as they're driving back, Big John is reading it and trying to decipher it, figure out meaning to it. But John B is staying quiet until finally he can't take it anymore. He stops the vehicle, gets out, and says, "I'm done." Big John starts pleading his case. John B doesn't really want to hear it. He didn't know that side existed in his dad. But Big John makes a really convincing case to John B on why he should stick around for this plan, and John B follows his dad. After reading the diary, Big John has an idea of where the second piece could be. He thinks it's in the gravesite of a guy in Charleston. So that's where the two are headed next. The rest of the Pogues didn't have quite as interesting of a day. After Key had headed home and said hello to her parents, who were worried sick about her, she heads over to fill JJ in on the fact that Big John is back. She, though, can sense that there's something wrong with JJ and asks, "All right, what's up? Was it something Pope said? I mean, we're both past whatever happened with us, but something's clearly bugging you." And he admits that, yeah, it is what happened with Pope. It's the fact that they almost had something on that boat, and he doesn't want to ruin it. Key, though, seems more than willing to get in some kind of a relationship with JJ because the heart wants what the heart wants. But JJ flips out. He basically insults Key, calling her a kook and saying that he's just going to mess this up anyway and he's not good enough for her. She's too good for him. It's as if he's literally insulted by the fact that this girl wants to hook up with him. He especially gets really mad when she has the audacity to say that she cares about him and will help him out if he needs help. JJ flees, not wanting to continue this talk with Key, and a couple hours later he shows up at John B's place, but he doesn't find John B, he finds Key. She had a sense that he would show up there after she told him that Big John was back. She wants to make up with JJ, but she also has news. Rafe is back. They had no idea about this. Sarah headed to her place to get some items, and when she was in her house, she overheard Rafe on the phone arguing with Ward. While Rafe was headed back to the Outer Banks, Ward decided that he was going to donate the cross to a museum. He's realizing what a terrible person he is, and he wants to atone for some of his actions. He feels like donating the cross is a step towards penance. Rafe, though, does not take this well at all. He feels like that cross is his. He's the one who saved it. It's his deal, and now his dad is swooping in and poaching it from him. Sarah does a really good job of eavesdropping on the conversation, and what she hears is that the cross is coming back to the Outer Banks. It'll be in Wilmington the next night. So getting the cross is still a possibility for them. Key fills JJ on all of this news, and as for John B., he left a note saying that he was going with his dad, so they're going to have to wait for him to get back to tell him about the cross. The way that JJ looks at this, it's great news. The cross is still in play. He tries to formulate a plan, but before he does, Key has to talk to him. She tells him that what happened on the boat caught her off guard too, but what really upset her was the fact that he said that she doesn't care about him. The two talk it out, they make up, and while they're not a thing yet, the friendship at least is back on track. As for the other budding relationship, Pope and Cleo head to Pope's place. It takes some convincing, but Pope convinces his parents to let Cleo stay after explaining, "She saved my life." Pope then fills his parents in on all the drama that happened, and out of everybody, he's especially going to be pumped to hear about the cross because he's happy that it didn't sink to the bottom of the ocean. As he tells his parents, "I want people to know the story of Denmark Taney. He got probably one of the most valuable objects in the world, and he gave it to a church full of freed slaves. If that cross is at the bottom of the ocean, that story never gets told." While it is a beautiful story, the bad news is Pope is on lockdown. When you go away for a year and you don't tell your parents where you're going and you show up with some woman from the Caribbean, your parents tend to get annoyed. They'll let her stay, but they're grounding you in the meantime. But the Pogues are not the only ones who are going to be after the cross. Rafe, even though he was given strict orders by Ward to head to Wilmington to pick it up, is not about to just let this thing be donated. He pays a visit to Barry. He explains the situation to Barry and says, "I want you to steal it. This thing is worth way too much money for it to be donated. And before you even start thinking about stealing it from me and not giving it back, realize that I'm offering you a job, and it's high risk and it's high reward, but it pays a lot. And when this thing gets stolen, there's going to be a lot of suspicion on me. But I'll have an ironclad alibi, so they're going to be looking for whoever I hired, which is you. But that's the thing. No one's going to suspect you because you ratted me out. So take this job, don't mess it up, and you're going to get a whole lot of money for it. Barry does agree to help, but he agrees to help for half. And then he tells Rafe to kick rocks because he doesn't want to be seen with them. That's going to be suspicious. So the next night, it seems like a whole lot of people are going to be heading to Wilmington with one goal: getting the cross. We'll start out episode 5 in Charleston, where John B. and Big John have made their way there looking for the other piece. They know where the grave should be, but all that's there is a Thai restaurant. There is a historical plaque, though, signifying that the church was there, the graves were there, but it all got destroyed in an earthquake. Everything remaining is down at the historical center, so that's where the Johns head. Big John poses a professor who's looking to inspect some of the items that they have on file just for research purposes. The guy behind the counter tells him that he doesn't have the authority to do that. And as a woman is passing by, he says, "Yeah, I don't have the power like her. She has the power, but I don't." This woman is pretty old, and she has what they need most of all in that moment, a key card. But the guy behind the counter also tells them that the items that they're looking for aren't actually in that particular building. They're downtown. But one step at a time. They need to get the key card first in order to access those items. And Big John wants John B. to do it. He wants John B. to hold up this woman at gunpoint and steal her stuff. It's something that John B. does not feel comfortable with, and quite frankly, he's really bad at it, which is actually a pretty good sign. But in the end, he doesn't get her bag because he's so incredibly bad at stealing. She basically laughs him off, so they have to go to plan B. That's going to be staking out the location of where the items are held and praying to God that somebody shows up and goes inside. Luckily for John B. and his dad, somebody does, and they sneak in. They head to the basement and they start looking around for anything that has the church's name on it, and they find it. They get excited, they start looking through the items, and in the last box, they finally find what they're looking for. It's a stone. It has the same complexion of the one they already had, and when they conjoin the two, it's a match. This is exactly what they were looking for, the missing piece. It's incredible, because when you put it up to the light, it shines through the eyes. If you didn't know any better, you think that Olmec gave it to you from Legends of the Hidden Temple. That's a throwback to my fellow millennials. Both of the Johns are really pumped about this, but when they exit the building, somebody has stolen the Twinkie, and there's a note. It was Carla Limbry. She had been looking for Big John all over the place, and when she found the Twinkie, she took it as collateral. Big John knew that this would come sooner or later, and he's finally going to have to pay Carla off for helping him find John B. The thing he promised her, though, was that magical shroud, and he doesn't have it. So he's just going to have to lie, making up a story. Both of the Johns head to Carla's place, she lets them in, and they start weaving this magical tale together about where the shroud was, where they found it, and then they finally hand over nothing more than just cloth. But Carla believes it. She puts it to her face, she stands up, she throws the crutches aside, and to both of the Johns' amazement, she walks. Because as Big John will later tell John B., the power of belief is the ultimate healing tool. So things really worked out for the Johns in Charleston. But back at the Outer Banks, news about all of them coming back home has hit the media. It's the big news story. The fact that the teenagers returned, but also the fact that Big John Rutledge returned as well. While the Pogues have become media stars, they're focused more on the cross. They all get together at John B.'s house, and they start discussing about how they're going to get to Wilmington. They know the time is of the essence, so they're going to have to get a vehicle to get to Wilmington. They need that vehicle if they're going to steal the cross back. For Key and Pope, they're also going to have to tell their parents. They were missing for over a month. They just got back home. So they're going to have to kind of nicely say, hey, we're heading out again. While Pope's dad isn't thrilled about the idea, he ultimately lets Pope go because he knows how much the cross means to Pope. As for Key and her parents, it takes a little more convincing. Key's dad especially does not believe the story about the cross, why they're going to Wilmington. He's very suspect. He's also very suspect over JJ, who's in their place listening to the whole story and backing up Key the entire way. He's giving her dad a lot of attitude. Key's dad doesn't appreciate it. But the real root of the issue is Key's father thinks that JJ and the rest of the Pogues are simply a bad influence on his daughter. He goes so far as to look at JJ and say, "You guys have ruined my daughter's life." So JJ apologizes but heads out. As he's leaving, though, he overhears Key's dad say some pretty disparaging things about him being a criminal, his dad, the backstory. So JJ ends up pinching his wallet, because if you're going to be accused of being a criminal, you might as well get something out of this. While Key prepped her parents on the fact that she was going to Wilmington, she did it as just that, prep. She wasn't asking for permission. So she follows JJ out, but her mom stops her, giving her a cell phone and a credit card, saying that this time she was going to do things differently, and if Key needs help because she's in danger, contact her. Key really appreciates it, and then she heads out, meeting up with JJ, and the two meet at the marina to head over to Wilmington. The problem is they still do not have a vehicle as they're heading to Wilmington, and they're game planning. That's when Sarah looks to her right, and she's surprised because she sees Topper. The Pogues convince Sarah to go over and talk to Topper, because Topper has a truck, and Topper would do anything for Sarah. And while she's hesitant to do it at first, she ultimately heads over and sweet-talks Topper into helping them out for the night. Now they have their vehicle. This isn't going to be easy, though. They have to head to the train yard, find the right train car, get the cross out, load it into the truck, and then get it back to the Outer Banks. But the train yard is full of trains, so they have to find the right one. Pope and Cleo go searching for it, and as soon as they find it, the train starts moving. They had planned for this. They know how to stop it. They have to go up ahead and connect some jumper cables onto the track. This will turn the green light red. It'll force the train to stop. And that's when they make their move for the cross. While Topper agreed to this, while it's going down, he's getting second thoughts. He starts questioning things because Topper doesn't really want to go to jail. But it's Sarah who convinces him to just nut up and finish the job. So Sarah and Topper get in his truck with Key and JJ on a dirt bike. Key and JJ head up ahead. They connect the jumper cables, and it works. The green light turns red, and when the train approaches, it has to stop. Pope and Cleo hop off the train, and they start trying to pickpocket the correct car, but they're caught by somebody from the railroad. This was not planned. Thinking fast, Pope tells the guy, this isn't what it looks like. We're trying to get over the tracks because we're trying to get married. You don't want to say no to love, right? And somehow, this ridiculous story works. The guy feels for Pope and Cleo and says, all right, fine. Get out of here before I call the cops. I don't want to see you again. And he walks off. He must be really hard of hearing because he doesn't hear it when Pope and Cleo open the train car door, and he doesn't hear it when a truck pulls up to steal the cross back. Eventually, though, he does turn around, and he sees that a train robbery is taking place. But at this point, it's too late. Topper's truck is loaded up with the cross, and the Pogues are headed out. But the train employee had alerted the police, and the police are now chasing Topper's truck. And the police are a little bit faster. JJ knows that his friends need help, so he hops on his dirt bike. But as he does so, Key's dad's wallet hits the ground, and she sees it. She's pretty pissed off that JJ stole it because she feels like he's doing nothing more than giving her parents ammunition. But he tells her, they thought I was a criminal anyway, so what does it matter? They don't really have time to argue about this, though, because Topper, Sarah, Cleo, and Pope need them. JJ and Key are on the faster vehicle, but JJ knows that it's too dangerous for Key. So he speeds up, matches Topper's car, and has Key jump onto it. And now it's just JJ on the dirt bike. He takes it upon himself to get rid of the police for Topper and the group. He throws a rock at the one cop car, destroying the vehicle, but the other police car is right on his ass. The other Pogues aren't about to let JJ fall for this, so they start trying to catch up to him. But as they're doing so, all of a sudden the dirt bike crashes, and they get very concerned because all they see is this destroyed dirt bike, but there's no sign of JJ. They're pretty distraught. And that's when JJ walks out of the woods and says, that didn't really go as planned, but seemed to work out. They're thrilled in that moment that JJ's alive, but they're also pissed off at him for what he just did. None of them, though, have time to chit-chat about it. The cops are standing above them on a bridge, and they need to get the hell out of there, which they do. As Topper's driving away, though, he's not doing it in a fast enough fashion for the group, and they're yelling at him, completely backseat driving him about how slow he's going. So finally he said, you know what? Screw it. Fine, I'll go faster. And he does, but the cross falls out of the truck. Pope gets really concerned, jumping out of the vehicle to check on it, and that's when he sees that what they thought they stole isn't what they stole. because that box, even though it said Cameron on it, did not have the cross. And that is because Barry and Rafe had already stolen it earlier in the day, and they're in the process of melting it down. In episode 6, when everybody returns to the Outer Banks, they're in a pretty bad mood. The trip to Wilmington just didn't go as planned. They came up empty-handed. Their only hope is that John B. and Big John have some good news. When they meet up, they don't. Big John instructs his son to lie to his friends, saying, "We'll make it all right in the end. We just have to keep things close. We can't cut them in yet." So John B. reluctantly does this. He lies to his friends, but his friends can tell that something's not right. But for the time being, they just have to take John B. at his word that they went to Charleston and didn't find a thing. Sarah, though, does have to confront him. She's noticed a change since Big John has come back into the picture. The stress of lying to his friends, of everything that's going on, it caves in on John B. and he loses it on Sarah. He says some things he's going to regret about her relationship with her dad, and she's not going to just sit back and let John B. talk to her like that, so she says, "Hey, you know what? Come find me when you're ready to tell me the truth." And she leaves. She's not the only Cameron who is extremely frustrated, though. So is Ward. Ward's gotten word that the cross was stolen, and he calls up Rafe, but Rafe plays dumb. And he does so in a way that basically admits, yeah, I'm the one who stole the cross without saying it. He doesn't seem all that concerned with the fact that the cross was stolen, saying, well, I mean, we were just going to give it away anyway. There's not a whole lot Ward can do from Guadalupe, and Rafe knows this. So he plays the ultimate trump card, saying, here's the deal. I'm in charge now, because everybody assumes that you're dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you're no longer calling the shots. Your time is over. Needless to say, Rafe is feeling pretty chesty after melting that gold down. Well, in a lot of ways, Rafe is right. I mean, showing your face in the Outer Banks after being dead is a pretty risky move, especially after what happened to Sheriff Peterkin. It's not impossible. He wouldn't even be the only person this week to show up back from the dead. So after thinking about it, he hops on a plane and heads to the Outer Banks. His daughter, though, is already there, and she's hard up for a place to stay. She knows she can't stay at her house because Rafe is there. And as she's weighing her options, she once again runs into Topper. They decide to hang out. And he happened to be going to a party with a lot of her older friends. A lot of people on the island are curious about what actually happened when she was marooned with the rest of the Pogues. They're looking at Sarah Cameron as a rock star now because she lived by herself for a month plus and she survived. And while Topper is enamored with this story, he's no longer all that enamored with Sarah Cameron. He admits that he made mistakes in the past. He was in love with her and he was jealous, and that's probably why he had a fight in the boneyard. But after a lot of time, he's been able to move on. He actually has a new girlfriend. That new girlfriend, though, doesn't look as good as Sarah Cameron. And there's alcohol in both their systems, and after some sweet talking, they end up hooking up for the night. Sarah only wakes up the next day when she hears a plane go over her head, and she recognizes the looks of it. She knows that her dad is back in town. And as for the guy she cheated on, John B. and his dad are heading off to find out more information on how to decipher what is on this stone. Big John has a former colleague who is great at this sort of thing. He knows just where she is, but when he heads there, he finds out that she recently died of a heart attack, which is super bizarre because she was really healthy. Her husband tells John that she had just returned from South America. And while he doesn't really have any information about the trip because they were all sworn to secrecy until it was published, it's definitely confusing. The only information that this guy has is the expedition was run by Professor Sowell, and Big John knows exactly who Sowell is. He used to be Big John's mentor until they had a falling out. It's one of the reasons why Big John didn't go to Sowell first. But now, he doesn't have an option. He has to. Him and John B. head over to Sowell's place, and it's not looking great. This guy was a neat freak. The lawn isn't done, and when they break in, there's dirty dishes everywhere. It looks like the place was kind of ransacked. After what happened to Mr. Sun's place, they're both on high alert. And that's when someone does attack them, but to their surprise, it's Professor Sowell. He's definitely not like Big John remembered. He seems very frazzled. After the initial surprise that he's seeing Big John in front of him, he explains that he's on high alert himself because people from his expedition are slowly dying off of weird, mysterious ways. The heart attack's a prime example. That woman ran triathlons. She didn't die of a heart attack. Sal feels like it's only a matter of time before whoever is doing the killing comes after him next. It's one of the reasons why he isn't interested at what Big John has to bring to him. But Big John forces it upon him, opening it up and showing Sal exactly what he found. And once Sal sees the artifact, he does get interested. Sal can't believe that Big John was able to find both pieces of this thing. He had just returned from the Orinoco Basin. So if anybody would have an idea of where this thing should go, it would be Sal. He starts deciphering the hieroglyphics on it. But as he's doing so, he warns Big John, you got to walk away from this. I mean, look what's happened around us. There are forces here. Big John reiterates that all they need to know is where to put it and what the hieroglyphics say. That's it. And Sal says, you just don't understand. But he keeps deciphering what the hieroglyphics say, although none of it's in English. Neither Big John or John B have any idea what he's talking about. Frustration ends up getting the better of Big John, who grabs Sal and says, tell me what they say. He pulls out a drawing of where to put it. But as he's explaining how to go through this properly in order to find El Dorado, a dart hits him in the neck. Dude, you got a dart in your freaking neck. And Sal just drops to the ground. Big John and his son realize that they're going to be under attack soon, so they hide in a closet. And that's when Singh's men come into the house. They don't know that Big John and John B are there. All they're interested in is finding out what Sal had. And when they see the artifact, they end up grabbing that. When it seems like the coast is somewhat clear, the Johns leave the closet. John B is instructed to tend to the professor, while Big John goes after Singh's men. The last thing that the professor says is the word Neville. That's it. John B can't get anything else out of him because he hears his dad screaming. His dad was ambushed by Singh's men. And it's not soon after that John B is ambushed as well. Singh comes out of the shadows. He thanks Big John for being able to find both pieces. And then he instructs his men to kill both of them. But Big John is able to barter with him, saying, you have no idea how to read that thing. So unless you're pretty sure that you'll be able to figure it out, you're going to want to keep me alive. Singh thinks about it and agrees with Big John. He says, yeah, no, you're right. We'll take you to South America. But then he instructs his men to go kill John B. Big John is pleading with Singh the entire time to let his son go, but it falls on deaf ears. He gets thrown onto a boat heading to South America, where he has 1 month to decipher what the hieroglyphics say. If they're not deciphered in a month, he's dead. As for John B, he should be dead, but he thinks fast. He throws some sand into his hitman's eyes, and he's able to escape. He's now got to find his way home. Back at home, his friends are trying to reacclimate to normal life. Pope tries going back to school, but it's a miserable disaster. He's missed so much time that he'd have to go back to the normal courses. And he's just too smart for those, so he walks out within about 2 minutes of being in it. He just can't handle being with us idiots. He heads to his parents' restaurant where a few hours later, JJ shows up. JJ tried getting a job at the docks, but they couldn't hire him because he just got such a bad reputation with the Kooks. As he was leaving, though, he overheard Barry and Rafe on a yacht. Curiosity got the best of him. He hopped in the water, and he overheard them talking about the fact that they melted the cross down and they're trying to sell the gold bars. He had to get this information to Pope, and Pope does not handle it well. Pope's been dealt bad hand after bad hand after bad hand, and this one, he just snaps. Because this cross really meant a lot to him. He's tired of being the good guy and vows to do something about it. A couple hours later, his parents notice that their gun is missing, and they ask JJ and Cleo about it. And while JJ and Cleo don't know where the gun is, they have a pretty good idea, so they start looking on the island for Pope before he makes a horrible decision. Cleo finds him at the marina. He's got the gun pointed at Rafe, pretty far away. Rafe can't see him. But before he makes this horrible mistake, Cleo is able to talk him down, make him feel better, and the two head home together. JJ didn't find Pope, but what he did find was John B when he got back home. JJ has the same question for John B that Sarah had. Dude, what is going on? But this time, John B comes clean. He tells JJ that his dad killed 2 guys. It was the 2 guys from the coastal venture. They came there looking for Denmark's diary. After that, Singh showed up, they took Big John, and they tried to kill him. Big John is on a boat headed to South America, and John B's freaking out because he has no idea if he's ever going to see him again. This is a lot for JJ to take in, and while they have no idea what they're going to do, they do know that they need to get to South America immediately. In episode 7, Sarah has a very awkward breakfast with Topper. She doesn't really know what to do. She likes what happened, but she knows that it can't happen again. She does want to stay loyal to John B. As they're having this breakfast, though, they're overseen by Key, and Sarah gets really worried that Key's going to think less of her. So she chases after her and tries to explain herself. The two go back to Key's place, and Sarah comes clean about everything. Key's not mad at her, she's just disappointed. But in a way, Key understands what she's going through, because they've all been a little messed up since they returned. She starts talking to Sarah about the situation with JJ, and what really bothers her is the fact that JJ acts like stealing her dad's money clip is normal, like they can just move on from it. But Key doesn't want to move on. She wants an apology. As they're talking, Sarah gets a voice memo from Wheezy. Wheezy tells Sarah that she's in the Outer Banks. She needs to meet with her immediately. She doesn't want to be seen. Come to a rental property that Rose had. That means that just about all the Camerons are back, because Ward made his triumphant return the other day. He goes and surprises Rafe, and that's exactly what it is, a surprise. He has to play this smart, though, because Rafe is such a loose cannon. Ward, however, loses his cool when he finds out what Rafe did with the cross. He can't believe that his son was so dumb to melt a priceless object down. I mean, it was one of a kind, and Rafe just doesn't understand the severity of it. All he's thinking about is the money, and he definitely doesn't care what Ward has to say. When Ward tries to drag him back to Guadalupe, he says, "No, I can stay here. I can have a life here. Dad, I flat out don't need you anymore." Ward tries to get Rafe to stop from leaving the room, and Rafe actually jacks him up against a wall. Rafe isn't about to be intimidated by his dad anymore, especially with the frail state that he's in. Later that day, Rafe, along with Barry, walk around town and they sell a lot of the gold. To celebrate, they throw a huge party at Rafe's house, but Barry brings up one concern he has. There's only one way all of this falls through, and that's Ward. Now that he's back, he feels like he could be the weak spot of their operation. He convinces Rafe that it's either going to be him or his dad. And if push comes to shove, his dad would kill him in a heartbeat. So he's got to get the jump on him. As for Ward's oldest daughter, while she's mad at her dad, she doesn't want to kill him. She heads to that property to meet with her sister, but she, just like her brother, is surprised because there's her dad in the flesh. The two have it out. It gets pretty contentious. Sarah has a lot to say with the position that her dad has put her in, and Ward definitely feels remorseful for what he did to her. He wants to make it up to her, and she points out that one of the ways he can do that is by giving the gold back to the Pogues, and he says, "Okay, we can consider that, but right now I'm here for you." He then hands her a credit card and keys, telling her that there'll be enough money on the credit card for her to survive, and the keys are to the property that they're currently in. She can stay there. Ward Cameron then leaves as quickly as he showed up. This will be news that Sarah fills Key in later that night because Key's parents are throwing an anniversary party, and Sarah's invited, as well as everybody else on the island, basically. Two people that won't be there, though, are JJ and John B. In order to find Big John, they're going to have to find where he's going. They head back to that murdered professor's house because he did have that quasi-map, and they find it. But they find a whole lot more than that. The name Neville, John B. sees it on a newspaper clipping of the expedition. It's the lone survivor left. His first name is Neville, and he lives in the area. JJ recognized the last name because he worked with somebody in the summertime with that same last name, and it's not a very common name. So they head to meet with the guy, they track him down, and they ask, "Hey, where's Neville at?" And the guy gives them directions to Neville's houseboat that's not too far away. When they get there, Neville, just like the professor, was on high alert. He thinks that anybody that's coming to visit him is doing so to kill him. It's quite a struggle, but they finally convince Neville that they are there in peace. They explain that unfortunately they were with the professor the other day and now he's dead. Neville's the only one left. They pull out the picture from the professor's house and they start asking Neville about it. And the first thing he says is that is an evil place. John B. explains that him and his dad found the piece that goes in the center. It's called the gnomon, and that's the thing that the two pieces combine to make. John B. starts explaining to Neville why they need to go to this place. The fact that Big John was kidnapped and they're headed there. But Neville doesn't want to give them any information. He is completely spooked. As John B. is pleading his case to Neville to give him the location, they hear something, and it's Singh's men coming to finish the job. They ambush Neville just like they ambushed the professor, although this time they miss. Thanks to the help of John B. and JJ, they're able to get away with Neville fully alive. Once they get to safety, John continues his pitch, saying, Neville, you're the only chance I have to see my dad alive again. Neville asks if they're going after the gold, and when both JJ and John B say yeah, Neville says, well, they're going to die anyway. Unless they can pass the test, but they probably won't. Because the test is in translating the idol. If you don't have the translation, you're not going to pass. Neville then goes into the backstory of this test. He tells them that El Dorado was founded by a king. When it came time for this king to die, he wasn't just going to give the gold to his sons. The gold had to go to the wisest man, and to ensure that this actually happened, he set up the test of the Gnomon. Whoever can pass this test will gain access to the gold. But if you fail the test, you die. And if you somehow get to the gold without taking the test, you're also going to die. JJ thinks that this is all talk, but Neville says, oh, tell that to the crew of the San Jose and the Royal Merchant. He does, however, ultimately give them the directions, because after all, John B. does want to save his father. But before they head there, he tells them both, make yourself pure of heart, pure of mind. You are there to save your father, because the gold kills everyone. Now that they have this information, it's just about getting to South America. Before they do that, they want to stop off and grab Key and Sarah and Pope, hopefully. They haven't seen him all day. They head over to Key's parents' party, but JJ warns John B., I probably shouldn't be seen here. I got into a big fight with Key's dad. I'm going to hang back if you don't mind. So John B. goes in alone. John B. runs up to Sarah. He apologizes for the last time he saw her. And he starts telling her, we got to go now. But she can't live with herself if she doesn't come clean. She tells John B. that she made a mistake and she hooked up with Topper, and he does not handle this well at all. As John B. is getting his heart broken, so is Key. She sees JJ and she goes and has a conversation with him, and it's the same crap. He's acting like nothing bad happened, as if he didn't steal her father's money clip. Just like with John B., JJ just tries to get Key to come along, but she wants to talk about this first. JJ doesn't want to talk. He wants to get this plan into effect and go save Big John. He can't believe that Key is being so, quote, selfish that she's not jumping on board for this opportunity. He starts walking away, and Key says, what is wrong with you? I mean, you're really going to act like you don't care? Hell, you're acting like I don't care. I love you, dude. JJ doesn't really know what to say to that. He stumbles over his words and just spurts out, yeah, it's not going to work, okay? Now I'm going to go help my best friend save his father. Maybe I'll see you when I get back. JJ then leaves. He meets up with John B. They're discussing what happened with both of them, but then John B. sees Topper and he goes into a rage. Even though Sarah begs him not to, John B. goes and swings at Topper, who doesn't even defend himself. He has no interest in fighting John B., but John B. keeps swinging, and he has to get pulled off by Key's father, who is enraged, because these two pogues just ruined his anniversary party. This is definitely going to have John B. in trouble when he returns, but for the time being, he's not planning on doing that until he returns with his father. Him and JJ head in the boat and head off. The one person missing from the day is Pope. After thinking about it, he decided to go back to school. Even though it's a Saturday, he's got to get his life back on track. Although in school, all he can focus on is the gold, Taney, the Royal Merchant, El Dorado, all of it. And then he realizes maybe it's all connected. He goes to Mr. Sun's office when he has some time, and he starts discussing all of this. And Sun says, well, haven't you ever looked into your family's archives? I mean, there might be some answers there. And while Pope says he hadn't. So when he gets home, him and Cleo start looking around for anything that might give a clue to the gold from Taney being connected to El Dorado. They find it. They find a letter that was written by Denmark Taney to his daughter that was never opened. When they finally do open it up, it goes into talking about the priest on the ship, but more importantly, it has the code for what the hieroglyphics mean. In episode 8, even though Sarah's mad at John B., she can't just watch him get arrested, and for whatever reason, John B. is still in the Outer Banks. Sarah knows this, and she knows that Topper is going to want to press charges, so she has to rush on over there. When she gets there, Topper is livid. He wants revenge for what happened. He didn't want to fight, John B. did, and he feels like John B. made him look like a bitch. That ain't gonna happen again. He goes so far as to ask Sarah, will you be there to help me press charges against this guy? You witnessed the whole thing. You can testify against him. And Sarah, in that moment, doesn't really know what to say, so she says, all right, I'll meet you at the courthouse later. Before she does that, though, she has Key drive her over to where her dad is and ask for a favor. She asks her dad if she and her friends can borrow the family jet, fly down to South America, and get Big John back. And since Ward wants to get back in the good graces of his daughter, he says yes. This isn't the only visit that Ward had from his children that day. Earlier, he was visited by Rafe, who makes a plea for Ward to leave the island and leave him the Empire. But Ward isn't willing to leave, and when he tells Rafe that he's taken some power away from him, in fact, he had a clause put in most of the contracts that put a lot of the power in Rose's hands, Rafe snaps. Barry's speech about getting rid of Ward ends up echoing in Rafe's mind, and he pulls a gun on Ward. He's about to shoot him, but Ward knows deep down that Rafe is not going to pull the trigger. He basically calls his bluff, saying, "You're not going to shoot me. I mean, I'm your dad. Deep down, you do love me." And ultimately, Ward is right. Rafe is livid at himself, but he doesn't pull the trigger. He just walks off. He can't bring himself to kill Ward, but that doesn't mean somebody else won't. He goes and talks to Barry about the situation, and Barry says, if you want me to kill your dad, you got to think long and hard about it, because once it's done, it's done. Rafe thinks he understands Barry. He's just in the moment emotional. He's also very ready for Ward Cameron to not be a thorn in his side, so he gives Barry the okay to go kill Ward. While Barry was laying out the plan to have Ward killed, John B. and JJ start laying out a plan to get to South America. They don't have passports. They don't have any money for a plane ticket. They need to find a way. But as they're discussing what a difficult situation this is going to be, they get a visit from the sheriff. He came looking for John B. because Hopper is, after all, pressing charges. John B. hides out, but the sheriff puts a tracking device on the Twinkie, so they're going to know where John B. goes. Once the sheriff does leave, John B. and JJ continue to talk about how they're going to get to South America, and JJ thinks he has an idea. His dad used to work for a drug smuggler who has a plane that happened to go to South America quite a bit. So JJ and John B. go visit him. It takes a whole lot of convincing. But JJ is very persuasive. He says, look, we'll help you unload the plane. All we're asking for is a ride back. Considering the drug smuggler, Barracuda Mike, usually pays his guys $10,000 for the help, he's saving $20,000 by having the free labor, so he agrees. It's also perfect timing because he has a plane arriving that day in the Outer Banks. A couple hours later, JJ and John B show up to help unload this thing. It's worth mentioning John B is very hesitant about this. He doesn't want to get in any more trouble, but as JJ points out, it's the only way. Unfortunately for them, though, Barracuda Mike changes plans on them. Instead of helping unload the truck, he now wants them to deliver the drugs to a drop location. And that is way more risky and way more dangerous than what they signed up for. But once again, they don't have a lot of options here, so JJ pushes to just get the job done. As they're driving, though, they see a cop. JJ acts super suspicious, and the cop turns around and starts chasing after them. They have no choice but to ditch the vehicle in the woods and take off running. They know that this is going to come with some pretty big ramifications, but in the moment, all they're thinking about is that just cost them their trip down to South America, and they start infighting. They do so at the Twinkie, and they're unaware of the fact that the sheriff is already there because he followed the tracking device. He's there to pick up John B. He does mention how the drugs were found, and while he might be a little suspicious that they had something to do with it, for the moment, he's just focused on bringing John B downtown. JJ vows to get John B out of this predicament because JJ is unaware of what Sarah's already done to help out John B. The other Pogues had a pretty eventful day. Cleo and Pope continued to try to find out what was going on with these hieroglyphics, and then it dawned on them that they might have a clue in Key's phone. They go to visit her at her house, and she's in the middle of a very serious discussion with her parents. Her parents feel like Key is just driving off the rails, and they want to get her back on track, which means they want to send her to a wellness retreat. But really what it is it's a camp for troubled youth. Kiara is completely against this and uses any excuse to get out of this conversation, which pisses her parents off even more. But Pope's suspicion is correct. Kiara had that picture of the painting from Singh's house in her phone. And after looking at the painting in Singh's house and looking at the hieroglyphics, they confirm that it is one and the same language, a language that's never been deciphered before. This language is the key to finding El Dorado, but it also could be the key to getting Big John back. They know that they have to get this information to John B right away. They're unaware that he's in prison, so they rush off. Key's dad really wants to stop her, but ultimately he lets her go. When Key, Pope, and Cleo get to John B's house, they find JJ, but they don't find John B. They're filled in that he was arrested. And at the courthouse, Sarah shows up to, quote, testify against him, but in reality, she pulls Topper aside and explains what's going on with John B's dad. She knows that that's not an excuse for what John B did, but what she asks of Topper is that he press charges the next day, because she tells Topper he's leaving for South America tomorrow, which means he'll never be back. Topper is very reluctant to do this, but he has a thing for Sarah, so he reluctantly agrees. He does so with the promise from Sarah that she won't go with John B. and that she'll hang out with him later that night. When later that night comes, Sarah is sending Topper straight to voicemail, and it's driving him nuts. He's hanging out at the marina, he runs into Rafe, and Rafe tells him, dude, my sister's playing you. You're too dumb to see it. She's probably with John B. right now. And Rafe is right. Sarah waited outside of the courthouse to see John B. She knows that John B's still mad at her, but she says, well, guess what? I'm the one that got you out of this, and I'm the one that can get you to South America. So you might want to follow me back to the chateau. And that's where they meet up with the rest of the Pogues. She tells them about her grand plan, that they're going to use Ward Cameron's private jet the next day to fly down to South America. That's when Cleo, Pope, and Key fill them in on the fact that they now have the translation of the stone. This is a huge win for the Pogues, and they celebrate that night with plans on leaving in the morning. Before they do that, there's some apologies that need to take place. John B. and Sarah make up. That didn't take long. They start hooking up. And in the other room, JJ finally apologizes to Key for stealing her dad's money clip. But nobody's aware of the fact that outside, Topper showed up. What Rafe was saying, it just ate at him for a little bit, so he needed to see for himself. And when he looks in, he sees Sarah hooking up with John B., and it just infuriates him. So he looks around and sees a gas can, grabs it, pours gas all over the place, and lights the chateau on fire. Everybody gets out safely from the fire in episode 9, and now it's just a matter of waiting for the plane. They can pretty much leave whenever, but Pope and Key want to tell their parents first. Pope knows that it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, and Key's pretty sure that it'll be the same at her house. And they were right. I mean, it is really uncomfortable. But Cleo does most of the talking in Pope's conversation, and Cleo convinces Pope's parents to let him go down to South America and chase after this thing. Key, on the other hand, that's a totally different story. She never really has a conversation with her parents, because when she shows up at her house, she's greeted by guys from that troubled youth camp. Leaving to go off and hang out with her friends the other day and blowing off the conversation with her parents was just the last straw for them. They called up the camp and they had him pick Key up. And she fights tooth and nail, but she is going to Kitty Hawk Adventure Therapy Camp. Think about the movie Holes, but instead of in the middle of the desert, this place is in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It sucks. And Key is going to be miserable there, especially considering she's going to be there for a while. We're talking a couple months. While Key is getting checked into this camp, everyone's shown up at the airstrip, and they're wondering where the hell she is. They figure that it's got to have something to do with her parents, so JJ takes it upon himself to go pick her up. He heads over there, and they definitely don't want to see JJ. They're reluctant to tell him any information. They just tell him that she's going to be gone for a long time, and it's not a comfortable conversation. Key's dad hates JJ, and he doesn't really have a problem with telling him as much. JJ calls up his cousin Ricky because he remembers that Ricky went to a similar camp, and he asks him, what camp did you go to? And Ricky tells him, I went to some place called Kitty Hawk. So at least now JJ has a beat on where Key is. JJ's not about to leave a Pogue behind, so he calls up John B. and explains the situation, saying, I gotta go get her. John B. doesn't want to give him any more time. He wants to get on the plane and get going. JJ understands, and he knows the clock is ticking, so he tells John B., look, if you gotta leave, we'll meet you down there, but I'm not leaving without Key. As he's driving, though, he gets a flat tire, and then he finds out that this wasn't just a normal flat. His tire was shot out by Barracuda Mike. Mike has come looking for revenge after JJ lost a huge stash of drugs for him, which means that Barracuda Mike is out of a lot of money. He knows that JJ doesn't have it, but what JJ does have is the power of persuasion. He tells Barracuda Mike that he is onto this huge treasure and he can get him his money. And at first, Barracuda Mike doesn't believe any of it, but once again, JJ's persuasion skills are incredible. And not only does he convince Barracuda Mike to let him go, he convinces Barracuda Mike to actually help him get Key back. because Barracuda Mike is going to be the getaway driver at Kitty Hawk. And if the Cameron plane has already left, Barracuda Mike is going to put Key and JJ on the next plane down to South America. In exchange for all of this, he's going to get a lot of gold and then some. Now it's just a matter of JJ getting into the camp. JJ is able to use those persuasive skills at the front and sneak in saying he's got a delivery. He leaves the Twinkie there as a decoy, figuring that once he and Key escape, a lot of the cops are going to head there thinking that that's their getaway vehicle, not realizing Barracuda Mike is waiting on the side of the road. JJ then finds the office and says he's got a message for Kiara. Although the woman tells him, we don't do that. I mean, you're not even supposed to be here. But for the first 6 weeks, they don't have any contact with the outside world. JJ notices that this woman has a picture of her cat on her desk. So he plays off of this, telling the woman that Key's pet cat had just died. He leaves the office and then watches the woman leave her office and then go right to where Key is to give her the, quote, bad news. Now JJ knows where she is, and late that night, he sneaks into her cabin, finds her, apologizes, they kiss, everybody cheers, it's adorable, and then they sneak out. It's a covert operation, but it's one that works because Mike is waiting for him, and now it's just a matter of getting to South America on one plane or the other. As for the Cameron plane, that had to leave early. When Rafe woke up that morning, he had second thoughts about what he asked Barry to do. First thing he did was head over to Barry's place and say, I'm calling it off. But Barry had already hired a guy to do it. And that really pisses off Rafe because Rafe thought that Barry was going to do it himself, not hire an outside gun. He knows it's a matter of time before this hitman arrives at Ward's dock, so he has to rush there. And when he gets there, the hitman is in full hitman mode. He had already stabbed Ward and he's about to finish off the job, and that's when Rafe shows up and saves him. Rafe starts beating the ever-loving crap out of this guy. But all of it is witnessed by a kayaker who just so happens to be on the water. At first, he asks Rafe if he wants him to call the police, which Rafe says no, and then this kayaker notices that it's Ward Cameron who's hurt. And that is shocking, because as far as anyone knows, Ward Cameron's dead. While Rafe tells this guy not to call the police, the guy ultimately does, and Rafe figures this, so it's a race to the airfield. They show up at the airfield before Kiara, before JJ, and nobody's really pumped to see Ward Cameron. Everybody's pretty surprised, but it is his plane. There's not a lot they can do about it. He's also severely injured. They then hear police sirens. That's because not only are the police after Ward Cameron, but they're also after John B. Topper decided to press those charges. He's not waiting around. So while the group would like to wait for JJ and Key, they can't. Because if they do, they're going to be arrested. Right before he does take off, Ward looks at Rafe and apologizes. He also thanks him for saving his life and says, it's all yours now. A couple minutes later, the plane takes off for South America. On the ride down there, Sarah is trying to tend to her father's wound, but it's pretty bad. Everybody is very suspicious about talking about anything around Ward, but he assures everybody, you've got nothing to worry about with me. I'm actually just here to help you guys. They're still on high alert. But the good news is they're headed to South America. And when Key and JJ realize that the plane left, they just jump on Barracuda Mike's plane, so they're headed there as well. And finally, in the season finale, when the Pogues arrive in South America, they get off the plane, and Ward Cameron calls to Sarah because he wants to help. Sarah tells him, no, you're not helping. Get on the plane and go to Guadalupe. And while Ward says okay, once the Pogues get a little bit far away, he does end up getting off the plane because he just can't take no for an answer. The Pogues get downtown and they're looking for two things. The river guide that Neville talked about and also Big John. They split up into groups, with Cleo and Pope going one way and Sarah and John B going the other. It doesn't take long for Sarah and John B to find Big John because they overhear him. He's stuck in a building trying to decipher the stone, but he's been having a tough time for the last month, and Carlos is losing his patience. There's a solstice going on the next day, so they're running out of time. It's either now or never. And he's basically given Big John a few hours to figure it out before they have to leave to trek off into the jungle. Big John knows that his life is at risk, so he attacks one of Carlos's guys, and that is what John B. and Sarah overhear. They create a diversion, shooting a bunch of fireworks into the building where they're keeping Big John. It distracts Carlos and his men enough for Big John to escape. But they can't have too much of a reunion because they have to get the hell out of there. They run away to avoid Carlos Singh's men who have taken to the streets to find them. Carlos's guys actually find Pope and Cleo before they find Sarah and the Johns, and that was just by happenstance. Pope and Cleo recognize Carlos Singh's men, so they take off running, and they're shocked because they just so happen to run into JJ and Key. They arrived in South America about the same time that the Pogues did. They had actually just gotten into downtown and were discussing how the hell they were going to find their friends, and that's when they saw Cleo and Pope running in the streets. Just like with John B. and his father, the pleasantries of being reunited have to be quick because they're being chased. They don't really know where to turn, so JJ knows one person in the area, and that happens to be Barracuda Mike, who hasn't left yet. So he asks for his help. Barracuda Mike has, in about 12 hours, become a real father figure to JJ because he hands him a machete, and he even calls in a favor to get JJ a boat. While he wasn't able to get him Jose's directions, he does have an idea of where, at the very least, Sarah and the Johns will be headed, so he gives them directions to that. Barracuda Mike then sends Cleo, Pope, JJ, and Key on their way and wishes them well. Back over with the Johns and Sarah, once they get a little bit of space, John B. shows his father what Pope found in his family archives. And Big John is thrilled because it's just what they needed. They know, though, they have to keep moving, and a little while later, Big John is able to find Jose, the tour guide that was recommended to them by Neville. It's crazy, though, because Jose, the tour guide, was waiting for them. Not only that, he was already prepaid for, and that's when it's revealed that he was paid for by Ward Cameron. When Ward sees Big John, it goes about as well as expected. Big John wants to kill him. They're making quite a scene, and that's when John B. notices that Carlos Singh has also arrived at the dock, so he has to rush these two guys to zip up their flies and end this pissing contest before Carlos and his men catch him. Everybody files into the boat, and Jose takes off. A short while later, the Johns and Sarah arrive at the base of where they have to trek into the jungle. They're planning on doing it the next day. But Big John is very suspicious of Sarah. He doesn't think it was a coincidence that Ward just happened to show up. He thinks that he was tipped off by his daughter. John B. doesn't believe that at all, and he's getting tired of his dad acting like everybody's out to get him, because Sarah's played a big part in their success up until this point. He doesn't say anything, though. He just lets his dad talk, because he knows that if they get the gold, it's not going to matter in the end. While those two are having a conversation, Sarah and her dad were also having a conversation where Ward promises, "I'm just here to help." But even Sarah doesn't really trust him. When they wake up the next morning, Big John is rearing to go. He knows that they don't have a lot of time before the solstice hits, so he warns them, if you guys lag behind, I'm not waiting. With Ward Cameron currently nursing a pretty bad stab wound, he definitely would be lagging behind. And the good thing is, Big John doesn't have to give him the speech because Ward says, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. He does want to be of help, so he says, I got a flare gun. If I see Singh come through here, I'll shoot off a flare to give you guys a warning. And then Big John, his son, and his daughter-in-law head off into the jungle. It takes all day, but at night, they finally arrive at the location where they hope to get directions to El Dorado. First, they have to put that statue in its proper place. When the moon hits a certain height in the sky, certain hieroglyphics start glowing blue. The trio quickly do their best to decipher it, and then they finally get the directions on where to head to hopefully find the gold. There's one final message that Big John deciphers, but he doesn't share it because he doesn't want Sarah to overhear. And this is the final straw for John B. He gets into it with his father about the fact that he is so paranoid he won't share the final message of this puzzle with Sarah, who's helped out this entire time. As John B. is screaming at his father, what does it say? They get unwelcome visitors from Carlos Singh, who asks, yeah, John, what does it say? And Carlos Singh got there because he was helped out by Ward Cameron. Ward cut a deal with Carlos Singh in order to make sure that Sarah was safe. Although Sarah doesn't want to hear that at the moment, she can't believe that her dad once again stabbed them in the back. Carlos backs up Ward on this, saying, when we're finished, Sarah, you can go with your father. He then looks at Big John and says, you can live too if you just give me what I want. Which way is El Dorado? Even with everybody at gunpoint, Big John still ain't saying anything. And it's Sarah who has to jump into action, knocking over one of the guys who had their gun pointed at John B. That guy gets up and points his gun at Sarah, and that's when Ward Cameron shoots him. This causes a bit of a firefight between Carlos Singh and his men against Ward Cameron, Big John, and the kids. Ward really wants Sarah to come with him, and Sarah says, no, I'm not doing that. And to prove her point, She points a gun in Ward's face and says, "Back away. I'm not going with you." This is something that Ward's probably used to because it's the second time in 3 days where one of his kids has a gun pointed in his face. It does work, though. Ward backs up and he leaves, sneaking off into the jungle and letting the rest of them fight it out. There's only one remaining guy in Carlos Singh's camp, and Carlos instructs him to go find Big John. Don't even worry about the kids. Big John, though, is injured. He took a hit in that firefight, and he's lagging behind. John B is certainly concerned for his dad, but he also knows they're super close to this treasure. At least they hope. Using the clues that were given to them from the stone, they're able to find a cave that they think would contain the treasure. They go inside, and at first, it does look like a dead end, but then they notice a hieroglyphic in the water that signifies that they're on the right track. They just have to get in the water. Big John knows that with his current state, and also his size, he's never going to make it through this tiny hole to get to the other side of the cave. He gives the group 3 flares that'll last 20 minutes each, and tells them, "I'll stay in here and stay guard." Right before they do leave, he tells them the last clue. The patient man can see with no light. Now it's just up to Sarah and John B to hopefully find the treasure that's waiting for them. While they head into the cave, their friends aren't too far away. They've been able to track John B, Big John, and Sarah using Carlos Singh's men, of all things. If they see one of Carlos's guys, they know they're on the right track. This does, however, give Cleo an opportunity to tell Pope how she really feels about him, and the two kiss. So the No Love Club is no more. But the Pogues aren't the only ones looking for John B, his dad, and Sarah. So is Carlos Singh, who continues to trek through the jungle. And it doesn't take too long to find the cave, thanks to Big John's blood trail. When Big John hears Carlos Singh, he hides. He doesn't really have a choice, he's just got to kind of wait it out. The thing is, Carlos knows that. He knows that Big John can't stay in there forever. So in reality, it's just a standoff. Deep inside the cave, however, using all the clues, John B and Sarah have found El Dorado. It was pretty dangerous. It took a lot, but they found the city of gold. And they grabbed some gold chunks to prove it. But they're running out of light from the flare, so they have to head back. And when they come out the other side, they're pretty surprised to see Carlos Singh waiting for them. Singh has them at gunpoint and makes them get out of the water. And that is when Big John finally shows himself. But he has a plan. He's holding a dynamite stick that's lit. He tells them that if Singh wants to kill them, he'll make sure that the dynamite stick goes off. And that way, Singh will never find El Dorado. He'll die in that cave. Singh doesn't believe that Big John will do it. So Big John chucks the dynamite stick deep into the cave. And Carlos Singh, realizing that this could be his opportunity to see El Dorado, goes after it, hoping to extinguish it before it goes off. This allows Big John, John B, and Sarah to try to get out of the cave before it explodes. While the dynamite stick does go off and it does kill Carlos Singh, Sarah and the Johns get thrown out of the cave. And they're banged up, but for the most part, they're okay. The explosion, however, from the dynamite tipped off everybody that was looking for them on where they are. So while they're trying to collect their bearings and they're looking at the haul that they have, which is quite a bit of gold, Ward Cameron shows up. The gold was just too enticing. He wants it for himself. But JJ, Key, Pope, and Cleo rush out of the jungle and surround Ward. They finally caught up to the group. While Ward has a gun and all they have is machetes, Ward's outnumbered and he knows it. Sarah is able to talk him down and give up his gun. But that is when Carlos Singh's last remaining guy shows up looking for the gold himself. And this guy doesn't have a conscience. He's about to steal the gold and start offing people. And the first one he wants to kill is Sarah. Well, Ward isn't going to let that happen. He bum rushes the guy, taking a lot of bullets in the process, but using his momentum to throw the guy off a cliff. It kills Ward, but he's not the only one who dies because Big John caught a stray bullet and he dies as well. Both Sarah and John B have to set up memorials for their father in the jungle and then head back to the Outer Banks. When they arrive back to the Outer Banks, they arrive as heroes. The Pogues have also taken their new wealth and used it for good. Sarah and John B open up a surf shop. Key is saving turtles. Pope's going away to school, and JJ bought a charter boat. They also are suddenly celebrities, and 18 months later, they're honored by the Historical Society for their trek into the jungle and for finding El Dorado. All of a sudden, the same people that want to throw them in jail or youth camps suddenly are beaming with pride. But there is one person who took real notice at what they did, and it's the clerk from the Historical Society. He shows up at their ceremony because he's absolutely amazed at what these kids were able to do. And now he wants their help. He explains that he needs some help because he's just too old. And then he pulls out a captain's log, a very old captain's log. And this log has everything. It's got where the ship sailed, where the ship stopped, all the information you would need. When they finally ask the guy, "Oh, who's the captain?" he says, "Edward Teach, Blackbeard." And all of them are very intrigued. And that is how Season 3 ends. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you leave a comment, be nice. Nasty comments make me feel bad. You don't need to point out every single thing I got wrong. It's going to happen. I don't write a script for these things. I just go off what I watched. I have a Patreon. I have merch. Go buy a t-shirt. Go be a subscriber. I don't know. Do whatever.